we'll go right back to the beginning. With that isolated understanding that you had at the time, what connected you and Sam together to decide this is what we're going to focus on and build a business from there?
So I did CrossFit at the time. So I was one of those people, wearing the same Reebok shorts and shoes as everyone else. Sam wasn't at that time.
You looked a bit more feral back then, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I think I looked older, actually. People say
I would agree, actually. Beard,
I had more
beard
hair,
and long hair.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got more hair here now and less. Anyway, so I did CrossFit, and Sam and me worked in a running business together. I was at university and he was a little bit younger. So I had the idea of the business. I thought CrossFit was just the beginning of training and fitness becoming a sport in its own right. And I thought that the consumer base would grow and brands would start to take notice of it. Sam still worked in the running industry. So he had been speaking to Nike, Reebok, Adidas, etc. And he had heard the same. They were about to focus on fitness as a sport in its own right. And they had no distribution. So we thought, we'd worked in running retail where retailers are so important to brands to be authentic to the customer. We thought this is going to happen with fitness, so let's do it before anyone else does.
What were the next steps to that? Because obviously it sounds very simple. Okay, here's an idea. Off we go. Let's start a distribution business. Not one of the lowest hanging fruit businesses to get going.
That is so true.
Young lads decided, right, there's something to go at here. What gave you the confidence to attack it and what were the next steps?
Gut feeling. That was absolutely number one. We lived in Leeds and we thought, we got a gut feeling this is going to work. Where's it going to work? It's not going to work in Leeds. Let's go to London, and that's it. So I packed up with my girlfriend, persuaded her to move to London. Sam came down with me, and we were lucky enough to know people in the industry. So we managed to build it around a small physical space, which we actually got on really, really good rental terms. Otherwise, it probably wouldn't have been possible. But we had a gut feeling it was going to work. We knew it would work in one place because that's where the demographic was. And we didn't have any fear.
That's the real key, isn't it? That space at the core of it, the core of the brand,
the original, the space we had.
That's always been the beating heart of the business, and it's always been what set you apart from others. I know things have evolved since then, which means that that's not necessarily viewed in the same light that it was. But how did you adjust to as you grew? I'm sure if it was being analysed by a venture capitalist or a PE firm, they'd say, well, actually, this space isn't necessarily contributing to the mission of the business. What made you decide this is what we need to build from the ground up with, rather than, okay, let's get a big warehouse and build our distribution from there? Because there's no logical reason that the space would have been the first step, is there?
There's no logical reason. Again, and people, in fact, I've got a story that when we took that first space, my father and my stepmother came down to London for our opening, and they sat in this like posh wine restaurant opposite. And she came in and she said, first thing she said to me was, she goes, the owner of that restaurant says nothing ever works here in this unit. And we were like, thank you. So you're right. Everyone thought the same. So we just had a feeling that having a physical space would be entirely different to what anyone has ever done. If we could get it on reasonable commercial terms and it makes financial sense, we thought that it would be unique. And then when we moved to the space that you know of and you've been to, that gym space, again, totally unique. And because we trained in gym environments and CrossFit environments, we know that that's where the customer who trains 5 to 6 days a week and has fitness as central to their lifestyle, as you know, you work with the same people, want to hang around with the same people in the same spaces that they feel comfortable in. They want to talk about fitness and health. And we thought, let's do it. Let's build it around that. Yeah, let's give it to them. Yeah.
Where was the first base?
So we had near our city space on Bow Lane in the city. Then we had a really cool store in Shoreditch, not far from here, and then was the big one in the city,
which was One New Change, which is
One New Change,
was as recognisable in the world of CrossFit for many, many years as Matt Fraser was, or Rich Froning was, I guess, when it was the big neon sign. Yeah,
I think we were the most famous CrossFit gym in the world. Obviously, you could argue maybe Mayhem or Invictus, but they were more like CrossFit brands and driven by individuals, whereas we were driven by that space, as you said, and it was always so important to the brand. And you're right, some other people involved in our business in the latter stages thought it wasn't, but physical space is so important. We're still seeing it now with the community brands.
It's almost become more important in recent years, hasn't it? Yeah. Which is you were right all this time.
We were right, and we were early.
Are you bitter about that at all?
No, I'm not bitter. Remember, no blame.
No blame. We discussed this beforehand. I apologise. But the growth of a distribution business, again, low margins, high stress, high risk, lots of things can go wrong. Two young lads from Leeds moving to London optimistically. What were the biggest challenges that you had to overcome in the sort of first couple of years? Well,
back then, retail distribution was, yes, it was a nightmare logistically, but it was okay as a business because we were in an industry sector, remember, a training or fitness, where we were new. We were the first mover. We were telling people what the shoes were, for example. So it was like selling candy to babies, really. So although margins were not as big as a own brand business, it was easy to sell product. We were selling out of product. Every product we bought, we sold out of. So those 3-4 years were quite easy. It's when the bigger the business, a business like retail, the bigger it gets very, very complicated from a tech, operational logistics perspective. And that's when maybe the two lads from Leeds with the dream had some challenges, but originally, again, it was pretty easy originally just because we hit the space at the right time.
And fun, I assume.
So fun. The early stages are so fun, yeah.
When you got to those tech challenges, scaling challenges, staff management, startup funding, all the big buzzwords that surround the stage that you would have been at, did you have to look at delineation of duties, delegation? What were the big focus points that allowed you to actually break through the ceiling of challenge that came?
People, most important. People, delineation of duties. I probably didn't do that well enough throughout my whole journey at WIT, actually, as a CEO. I probably didn't delineate the duties well enough, maybe until the last stages. But that was definitely the most important. From a tech perspective, our systems were fine, but it is the back end, the delivery, warehouse, operational. We outsourced that kind of pretty early on because we were trying to fulfill out of our store and getting 500 orders a day and having people running around in the stock room in the dark. But you most of it's learn on the go at that stage. You bring people in who are specialists, they understand how to build out logistics and just go from there.
Is there a moment that you highlight as the big turning point? Because you joined CrossFit in its embryonic stages in many ways, and then commercially and I guess in terms of visibility, it blew up in mid-teens more, and then it kind of blew up again late teens. Was there a moment that you were stood in the space thinking, "Fucking hell, what have we done here"? Are there any real highlights that stick out as I can't believe what we've created. This is the best thing in the world.
Yeah, I think, it's weird because I never really felt like that ever. Aside from maybe when we had some really special events in that physical space, which is ironic because, online we might be selling on one day of 3,000 Matt Fraser shoes, which obviously produces a good amount of revenue. But I was more excited and more touched by 300 people coming to an event. And those are the special moments, yeah. Definitely.
So I've been to some of them, and they were.
You have, yeah.
I've been to many.
You've
of them,
led
actually.
some of them, yeah.
Yeah, they were fantastic, and the space was so well suited to it. One new change. It's not a cheap spot. It's not a cheap spot at all, by any means. I've spoken in the offices directly above that belong to Philip Morris International. Yeah. They've got big space, and I remember walking into those offices thinking, "Nope, this isn't cheap either."
Yeah.
And I thought, well, it's been down here this whole time. The risk tolerance, decision making that went into committing to that site when you did, how was that managed? How did you decide to pull the trigger? Was it again gut feeling? Did you have outside assistance in terms of financial modelling and forecasting, or did you again lead with your gut on that one?
There's an element of gut because we thought that taking it from a store to a gym could be really special. But no, there was. Remember, we'd had a store for 2.5 years by then, so we did have 2.5 years of data. We could see our online sales growing, so we could see the sales per square foot in the store. We worked with guys in Gus, Gus that had worked in gyms, and so they know the commercials of gyms. So we knew it would be tight, but we knew it would work, and it really did work before COVID. Commercially, it always worked brand wise, but before COVID, it really did work. And I think we're proud of how we could drive so much revenue through that space pre-COVID.
How did your own interaction with fitness, health and well-being evolve as you became more engrossed in scaling the business? Because I can imagine that was difficult to balance.
Yeah, it's ironic because I think those pictures you've seen of me with the beard and skinny, pasty, and with the beard and receding hairline is probably, obviously when I started WIT, I trained constantly in CrossFit gyms, and you go through this funny like 3-4 year period when you're not that training that much and you've got your own gym. And then I realised that it was important to practice what you preach, and for mentally, obviously, as you know, was equally important to me. So I've always trained hard, but there was a little bit in the middle where I went off the rails.